Splatoon Raiders is set in a world with over 10,000 years of history, and Nintendo explains basically none of it. So before you play Splatoon Raiders, let me get you up to date. But the first question we should be asking is, what is a Splatoon? Because from the outside, Splatoon looks like a game where squid teenagers shoot paint at each other while listening to people gargle water, and that's it. But it's also a post-apocalyptic world where humanity is dead, sea creatures inherited the earth, civilization rebuilt itself on top of our ruins, and the biggest celebrity musicians in the world keep accidentally becoming involved in military conflicts, ancient conspiracies, and treasure hunts. Knowing the lore first makes this way cooler. Okay, first, what is a Splatoon? But for real this time. Splatoon is Nintendo's take on the online shooter genre, which means they looked at Call of Duty and said, what if it was actually good? Instead of bullets, you shoot ink, and instead of just killing people, the main multiplayer mode is about covering as much of the map as possible in your team's color, and instead of grizzled soldiers yelling out military jargon, everyone is a squid kid wearing designer streetwear. But the actual world of Splatoon is so much weirder because it doesn't take place in some alternate dimension where squids were always humans. It takes place on Earth. Our Earth. Long after humanity had a bunch of world wars, flooded the planet, and went extinct. Eventually, marine life evolved into the dominant species. Squids evolved into inklings, octopuses into octarians, the jellyfish became retail employees, and the manta rays became music producers. Nature was finally healing. And then they invented rank battles. Splatoon is a game about the future living on top of the past. However, their history rhymes a lot with ours, because the first major conflict is the Great Turf War. Inklings and Octolings are fighting for the limited territory left on the surface. The Inklings won, and the Octarians are forced underground into Octo Valley. And that old war became the foundation of what would become every major conflict in the series. So Splatoon Raiders is probably not just sending us to a random island, it is sending us into a world where history is buried everywhere. The first Splatoon game starts simple. The Great Zapfish has been stolen, this giant electric catfish that powers the entire city. So you, as Agent 3, get recruited by Captain Cuttlefish, an old veteran from the Great Turf War, to go into Octo Valley and fight the Octarians. The important part is that Splatoon 1 establishes the series' basic structure. On the surface, Inkopolis is this trendy, carefree city. Underground, there's an entire Octarian society still living in the shadow of a war they lost a century ago. And then there are the Squid sisters, Callie and Marie. At first, they were just the pop idol hosts of Inkopolis News. But by the end of the game, you find out they're also connected to the Squidbeak Splatoon, the secret group fighting against the Octarians. And Splatoon loves to do this. The idol groups are never just meant to be idols. Sure, yeah, they're the face of the game and they also shape the culture, but they also have a big role in the overarching plot. So whenever Raider says that Deep Cut is central to the story, that's just par for the course, but we'll get to them soon. For Splatoon 2's story, we can just... there we go. Yeah, it's basically the exact same story, except this time Callie is missing too, and you save her at the end. But the real shift happens in Octo Expansion. Octo Expansion is where the campaign story actually gets good. You play as Agent 8, an Octoling who wakes up with no memory in a mysterious underground subway test facility. You are then guided by Pearl and Marina, the idol duo, off the hook. And this is where the Octolings become the protagonists, because before this, there was just no way to play as an Octoling. Agent 8 is not some evil Octarian soldier, they are a person trying to escape a system that has been controlling them. I mean, heck, Marina herself is an Octoling who escaped to the surface and became a pop star. This matters a lot because Splatoon's world slowly stopped being Inklings good, Octarians bad, and starts becoming a story about propaganda, isolation, culture, and what happens when people start seeing each other as people. Also, the villain is a telephone blender that wants to destroy the world with a giant statue, because Splatoon can't be normal for more than 8 consecutive seconds. But Octo Expansion is essential because it proves Splatoon can carry a serious story. A story about memory identity, oppression, and escape. That's the version of Splatoon I want Raiders to build on. Then comes Splatoon 3, and Splatoon 3 changes the vibe immediately. We leave Inkopolis and head to Splatsville, the city of chaos and table turf battles. What, you think you're too good for the card game that no one cares about? Everything is dustier, louder, weirder, and more lawless. It feels like a place where someone would sell you illegal amiibos behind the gas station.
Hey kid, you want a Lario?
You mean Mario?
What are you, a cop?
This is where we meet Deep Cut, Shiver, Fry, Big Man. They host the Anarchy Splatcast, they run Splatfest, and they're also treasure hunting bandits. Which is already very important for Raiders because Raiders is literally about going on an adventure with Deep Cut and search for treasure. But in Splatoon 3's campaign, Deep Cut is not your friend, they're your rival. They keep showing up, picking fights, and trying to claim treasure for themselves. Shiver attacks with a shark, Fry attacks with eels, and Big Man attacks by becoming a big man. Actually, no, he becomes a big manta ray, but that's complicated. At first, they look like selfish troublemakers, but later you find out they're not stealing treasure just because they're greedy. They're doing it to help the people of Splatland. Deep Cut are chaotic and dramatic. They're absolutely the type of people to get caught in a storm and stranded on a random island, but they're not heartless. They care about their community and their culture, and also they're idiots, like canonically idiots. Splatoon 3 also dives deeper into humanity's past with Alterna, a massive underground facility tied to the final remnants of human civilization. This is where the series shows the machinery, mistakes, and desperation they left behind. And by the end, you fight Mr. Grizz, a mammal obsessed with bringing back mammals. So the final boss of Splatoon 3 is not just some evil bear, he is the ghost of the old world trying to overwrite the new one. And this is what Splatoon lore keeps coming back to. The times have changed, the world can never be the same as it was. Moving forward is the future. The only other thing worth mentioning is the DLC side order, which follows Pearl, Marina, and Agent 8, so the only thing you need to know about it is that Raiders borrows gameplay elements from the DLC. But now, let's make a deep cut with Deep Cut. So now let's make a deep cut. So if Raiders is built around Deep Cut, then you need to know who they actually are. Because if you've only played the multiplayer, then they just might be, oh, the Splatoon 3 hosts, but they are way more than that. Shiver is the cool one, the calm, elegant, cold-blooded member of the group. She behaves like the leader and has the confidence to back that up. And again, she fights with a giant shark named Master Mega, so you know, that's cool. Fry is pure gremlin energy. She is loud, expressive, and theatrical, like really theatrical, constantly looking to just dance, fight, or gorge on food. And then there is Big Man. Big Man is perfect, no notes. He is a manta ray, his name is Big Man, he says A. He somehow has the most wholesome energy in the entire group, while also being part of a bandit trio. Together, Deep Cut has this incredible dynamic. Shiver is the composed leader type, Fry is the chaos engine, Big Man is the emotional support manta ray. And Raiders putting them front and center is exciting because Splatoon 3 gave them a lot of personality, but not enough time. But Deep Cut is only half of Raiders. The other half are the Salmonids. Salmonids were introduced in Splatoon 2 Salmon Run, and if you only played that mode, you might assume they're just a hive mind of angry fish people who want to beat children with frying pans, which is fair, that is mostly what they do. But Salmonids are not mindless monsters, they have culture, rituals, and social roles. They have a whole relationship with death where fighting, being eaten, and returning to the cycle of life is treated as honorable. Also, they carry cooking utensils because Salmonids literally want to look delicious. Their frying pans and weapons are passed down through generations. Boss Salmonids aren't born that way. They were once a regular salmon that had to go through a harsh environment, fill out a specific role, or they had some training. Some salmons need a bigger, stronger body, so they become a steelhead or a maw. Some are just born with a higher intelligence, so they become things like a steel eel or a scrapper. Some are trained as kids to be a fly fish or a fish stick. And this is why a lot of people get mad when someone calls little buddy a pet. No, that's someone's child. That is a small wet man with a family. You cannot just look at a salmonid and say, "Aw, my little pet." What if someone looked at you and said, "Who's a good boy?" Don't answer that, I said that by mistake. And here's a fun fact, salmonids aren't given names like inklings. Instead, they receive titles, which is how you get salmons that are called the firstborn child of Alkine, the hidden blade of the Yakiharas, or the faithful servant of the true salmon emperor Hizunumasu. which implies that there are multiple salmon emperors, and hopefully Hizunamasu is the real one. So when raiders bring salmonids back as the main enemy force, we're not just fighting random fish goblins, we are walking into someone else's culture, someone else's territory, and probably ruining their entire week. And now raiders have these stronger salt-covered variants, which immediately I start theorizing about salt baking. Because remember, salmonids want to look tasty. So if these guys are covered in salt, that might not just be an armor upgrade, that might be a status symbol. Maybe as salmonids survive harsher environments, win battles, or prove themselves, they are rewarded by their tribe with salt. Or maybe Nintendo just thought salty fish monsters look cool. But this is Splatoon, so somehow, both are probably true, but that's just a theory. Okay. So what are you actually walking into with Splatoon Raiders? Raiders is the first Splatoon spin-off, not Splatoon 4, a spin-off, and that already changes the expectations. Instead of the usual structure where multiplayer is the main course and the campaign is this weird little lore goblin that most people ignore, Raiders is single-player focused. You play as a mechanic working with deep cut on mysterious Spiralite Islands, hunting treasure, fighting salmons, customizing your character, building gadgets, and raiding the islands. This is such a good setup that I'm honestly shocked it took Nintendo this long, because Splatoon has always had enough lore for a proper adventure game. It has ancient ruins, lost civilizations, music groups with secret identities, underground societies, a war-torn history, a civilization of fish warriors who want to look delicious, and a bear who tried to commit mammal-based world domination. This series has been screaming for a story-focused spin-off. My hot take is that Nintendo is finally letting us have a proper Splatoon campaign. It really wasn't until Octo Expansion that we get a good campaign, but this looks like an actual adventure. And the reason Deep Cut makes sense for that is because they're already treasure hunters. They already feel like the kind of characters who would drag you into a terrible idea, and then somehow save the day with music, violence, and a manta ray. And the reason Salmonids makes sense is because Raiders seem to be taking us directly into their world. And the Salmonids are honestly my favorite species in Splatoon because of their culture. This is Nintendo testing what else Splatoon can be, and that's exciting because Splatoon World is too good to only exist between Turf War matches. Splatoon is a game about the future living on top of the past, and now Raiders is sending us to another place where the past is probably buried under ink, treasure, and a worrying amount of fish. So no, you don't need to have played a single Splatoon game to enjoy Raiders. You can probably just jump in, meet Deep Cut, shoot some Salmonids, collect treasure, and have a perfectly good time. But knowing that this colorful squid game is built on top of a dead human world, knowing that the Inklings and Octarians have a century of conflict behind them, knowing that the idol groups are never just idol groups, knowing that Deep Cut went from news hosts to rivals to allies to your actual adventure crew, and knowing that the Salmonids are not just enemies but an entire culture of honorable fish warriors, that makes Raiders way more interesting. And after I played Raiders, I want to come back and cover the entire series properly. The games, the music, the lore, the DLC, the part where the phone tries to kill you, all of it. But for now, you're ready for Raiders. Welcome to the world of Splatoon. Watch out for the small fries, they are most likely going to kill you.